So good morning, everybody, in attendance of this co-organized webinar by EDSO and ESMIG on ECU regulation supporting the cyber revolution for the energy sector. And the point of this webinar is whether to maintain or erase at the end of our discussion that question mark in the title. To do so, we shall have the president of ESMIG, the strategist of one of the important members of EDSO, and a member of the EDSO Technology and Knowledge Sharing Committee. And then we shall have two members of the Commission, very reputed and very much hands-on our topic. Panel discussion will follow. And we really hope to have our consideration on that question mark, let's say, very well discussed and analyzed during that panel discussion. A brief wrap-up from myself and my friend and colleague Willem Strabing, Technical Director of ESMIG, will conclude this. The panel session, which is the great point of this webinar, will be chaired and moderated by the Managing Director of ESMIG, Tomáš Ljobet, whom is on the screen with me in this moment. So some housekeeping rules that are the usual ones. Paola, could you please bring them? That is, the host will be the only one enabling your microphone for speakers. And the video will be on only for speakers while intervening. Obviously, I will see that Tomáš during the panel discussion and occasionally myself, if needed, we appear as a moral suasion in order to ask the participants to be a little bit briefer than what they are doing actually. To participate actively and to place a question, you can do it by using the Q&A tool. Please do not use the chat tool to put the questions. The chat and the raise hand function has been disabled for this webinar. And as far as the questions are concerned, the moderator will see to aggregate a similar question and to delete those questions that have already been answered or which answer is included in a successive question and so on. So that's everything. We are very happy at EDSO and ESMIG to have such a lot of people watching this webinar. And I would leave now for the opening the floor to Luis Gonçalves, CEO of Iscremeco and the president of ESMIG. Will be followed by Anne van der Molen, Grid Strategist of Stedin, Vice Chair of EDSO Technology and Knowledge Sharing Committee. Luis, you have the floor, please.
Yeah, thank you, Roberto, and let me also welcome everybody in this webinar. I'm very pleased to be here today, and very pleased, as Roberto said, to see that so many participants are joining us. It's a very important topic, and before I go into maybe a short, say, summary of what is important for us in this webinar, let me introduce maybe ESMIG for those which are not familiar with ESMIG. So we are an organization that is very fundamentally important in the rollout of smart metering in Europe. And I'm, as a president, I'm very pleased to be here today. I'm since various years member of ESMIG, of the executive committee team, and I got the pleasure in the last few months to be elected as the president, which I'm very happy to represent ESMIG here in this webinar. And maybe just about me, I'm more than 20 years in the energy sector, and therefore also I think, very familiar with the challenges that we are facing today, but we were facing also in the past few years. Let me talk about ESMIG a little bit more, and what are our objectives and where we are today. ESMIG, the European Association representing the smart energy and smart metering industry, a group of smart energy suppliers that are getting together to drive the rollout of smart metering across Europe, but also support the authorities in setting the rules, the strategies, and the specification. Technology is core to our members, and technology is also the core, say, approach that we have as ESMIG, with a spirit of innovation, with the spirit of supporting the DSO, supporting also the society to manage the challenges that we have. And that was also the aim that we had the past 20 years. Today we have about 18 members, mostly from the industry that is, as I said, supplier industry, with a variety of companies from, we are very proud of that, from the product creators till the data management companies that are then utilizing the data that is coming from the smart meters for the benefit of, let's say, of our customers and of course the society. So if we go to the next slide, you will see the variety of our members, and it's important to underline that basically the core, the major companies are in this environment of how we create and how we provide solutions, innovative solutions to our customers. So if you go around, you can see that most of our members are very well positioned across Europe in most of, or let me say, in almost all smart metering projects when it comes to the products, but also to the solutions and utilization, as I said, of the data. And that leads us to the next topic, the topic that we have today here, which is a very important topic, and it is the smart architecture that's getting more and more complex. And it's not only the meter itself; it is about the complete ecosystem, where we have the basically as today end consumers, and which will become prosumers, and we have then the infrastructure providers with the grid operators, the energy suppliers, and we are as ESMIG or the ESMIG members, we are somehow the interface between both. And security is a major topic. Security is the topic that we all have at the moment as a major challenge that we need to take into consideration. And the second topic is for us, and this is also our aim as ESMIG, is to create this interoperability environment that we bring technologies together, but we bring as well the different vendors and different protocols together. That is our major aim, so that we really compel then the overall say ecosystem, and guarantee that the ecosystem is in line. That's our major target. That's also our major goal that we have as an organization, not only to enable the consumers to get to have the right data to manage their energy and their energy consumption and get efficiency in, but also the ecosystem that is important to be able to provide the energy to the consumer. So for today, a major topic that we have, and this is we have various let's say activities and various working groups working on that. For today's benefit for all of you is that we would like to share with you our vision as ESMIG and how we could contribute to the digital transformation of the energy industry, which is a major topic that we as a society are facing. And we have to go. We know that this is a must for us as a society, but also a must for us as an industry, to provide the right solutions. An important element is smart metering. We have at the moment achieved in Europe the range of 50-55% of the rollouts. You may remember that there was a goal of achieving by 2020 80%. We have not managed to achieve that, and today we are facing a lot of challenges from the energy supply. I don't need to go through that. But that is also the aim that we have, all of us. How can we accelerate and how can we build an infrastructure that is sustainable, but also will provide the right data for our stakeholders, so that they are able to manage their challenges. And cybersecurity, that is the major topic, is a key element. But we need to look as well that we're talking about data that has been created by the smart meter. Has been there is a communication infrastructure, and there is then also a data management environment. So it's not only about the smart meter as a device, it's about the complete ecosystem that we need to take into consideration. And this is exactly what we will discuss today. And then of course the major topic, the legislations, the rules, and the authorities that are of course very concerned. And of course, when I'm saying that is because this is a critical infrastructure. The energy ecosystem and the infrastructure is a critical infrastructure that we have, and that is very important to create a secure, a safe, but also a very, let's say, robust infrastructure. And data flow is a challenge. Data flow is not only the challenge from the amount of data that is going around, but also how to use it from a security, but also from a privacy perspective. That is also a major aim that we have as ESMIG. So having said that, I am very happy to be here. I'm very happy that we managed to get a joint webinar, and I would like then to hand over and let us continue with this very exciting and very interesting event. I will be available also if there are any questions, but would like then to hand over and let's kick that off. I think this is a very interesting and very important webinar for all of us.
Yes, please. Anna, you have the floor. Anna, you are muted.
Yes, thank you, Roberto. And also from my side, or from EDSO side, a warm welcome to this webinar. And perhaps a welcome back to this webinar, because if you look into the list of events that we've had in the past, we had a history of doing seminars like this, seminars on data, seminars on cybersecurity, because we really think cybersecurity data is a crucial element in the energy transition and worth sharing information and knowledge on. So welcome back also on behalf of E.DSO. I am Anne van der Molen. I am Vice Chair of EDSO's E.DSO's Technology and Knowledge Sharing Committee. For those of you who are here for the first time, who haven't heard about E.DSO before, we are an association of around 40 DSOs all across Europe, 30 countries, around 35 DSOs, representing a little over 200 million customers. And we're really looking forward to sharing our knowledge internally, developing internally, and developing also with you, because we really believe that, of course, we are in front of a major restructuring of the energy system. We are also in need of knowledge, of competencies that need to be developed, legislation needs to be developed. In other words, a lot of things that need to be developed. So if you look into how we do this, we of course have several topics, but we also organized ourselves around development of crucial elements like technical expertise, like policy and regulation, research and innovation, and we also are involved as an association with several innovation projects. If you look into cybersecurity, smart metering and data, and they've been on our agenda for quite a long time. Actually, before it was named E.DSO, and we were named E.DSO for smart grids. Maybe you know us under that name. And we started with the vision that we were going towards a smart grid, a grid that was relying on data, or a system that was relying on data. So you could say the smart meter, data exchange and cybersecurity is really at the heart of our association from the beginning, and it still is. Now, from those publications and dossiers that we listed before, I just took just a few snapshots indicating. Can you move to slide number 6, please, Paula? It is the previous one. Yeah, thank you. I took these because they give a nice overview of the context that we are surrounding when it comes to data and cybersecurity. It is the Connecting the Dots report that we as E.DSO produced with Euroelectric and McKinsey, I think a little over a year ago. And what it does, it gives an outlook of the investment and also the capability development that is needed for the distribution system towards 2030 and a little beyond. And what it does, it maps, and you can see it on the left-hand side, the implications of electrification, of mobility, of buildings industry, the change of the generation mix, what it will mean for the capabilities that we will have in the network. So we need to modernize the network. We need to digitize our way of working. Also, sensor produce data for the energy system and the smart meters, but also the power electronics and the smart devices connected to that really will become an ecosystem that will form the next generation energy system. And in the end, that will mean, because the energy system will mean that we'll have a lot of dynamics in the distribution part of the network, and with that data and with the systems, we will be able to manage the transition and also manage the power system. The next slide, please. So what we'll see, we will have a lot of smart devices coming and a lot of capabilities needed. And also in that report, we mapped the capabilities towards the boundary conditions that need to be filled in. One of those is, of course, that we will need to be able to build reliable, safe data flows and data management schemes, but also need to be able to handle it in the masses and that we will have in order to connect all consumers, all customers, all users of the system. And in order to do that, we not only need to have technical capabilities in place, but also we will need to have regulations in place. European regulations, national regulations, also regulations, economic regulations, technical regulations. So the digitization of the power system will come with a lot of evolution, not only in technology, but also in legislation. And then, by having said that, we are at where the scope of today's, the matching between digitalization, cybersecurity, and the transformation of the power system. On behalf of the Technology Committee, and actually on behalf of whole E.DSO, I wish you a really nice webinar this morning, and we will hope to see you back also on upcoming editions, because we will continue to do this. And having said that, I would like to give the word to the chairman of the next phase. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Anne, for your contribution. I've got a little bit of difficulties in managing Zoom this morning. And I would like now to give the floor to two important representatives from the Commission. Michela Collau, Team Leader on Cybersecurity at DG Energy. Well, behind this label, Michela has also a long experience as a regulator, because she was a regulator, in fact, for probably 5 years, if I well remember, before joining DG Energy and the Commission. Is that correct, Michela? You are welcome.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Michela, we can hear
Perfect.
you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I had some connection problems this morning. Yes, you're right. I was also a regulator at the Austrian National Regulatory Authority. And should I already start my presentation now?
Yeah, of course, because you are the right person to combine all these aspects of cybersecurity and innovation in the measuring world and in the grid with the current regulation, and maybe tell us something in the evolutive way that we expect. Please, Michela, you have got the floor.
Thank you very much. Okay, today I'm going to talk about cybersecurity in the energy sector, and why it is important and what you can expect in the near future. So if you put the next slide, please. I will give you a little bit of the context. So cybersecurity in the energy sector. Why is it important? The energy sector in the Union is undergoing a profound transformation, as you know. We have more and more decentralized markets, more players, a higher proportion of energy from renewable sources, and also more and more digital and interconnected systems. The digitalization of the energy sector is, without a doubt, very useful because it delivers a strong contribution to energy security and to the climate goals. By making our energy systems more efficient and more flexible and resilient, but also it comes with a new challenge, and this is, of course, cybersecurity. And cybersecurity is, of course, now more than ever a key horizontal requirement for a secure and robust energy system. When you go to the next slide, please. In the European setting, we have a lot of policies like legislations, different acts. Some are already in place, some are in the making. And no matter if they are cross-sectoral or horizontal, as you may say, energy is always an important part. There are some who poorly focus on energy. For example, the Commission recommendation on cybersecurity in the energy sector, even it's a recommendation with the staff working document of 2019, or the network code, which is now in the planning. So the network code on sector-specific rules for cybersecurity aspects of cross-border electricity flows, which I will tell you more in the next slides. But also, for example, we have the NRS directive, where energy is a key sector, so to say. And also, of course, for other legislation, but my colleague will talk more about this, is also some parts of the energy sector that might be also covered. For the next slide, please. But what I'm going to focus on today, which I think is really utmost relevant because it is long time now in the making, and I think we're coming to a step closer to finalize it now, hopefully. And this is really the network code on cybersecurity. For this, we have the legal basis of 2019, which empowers the Commission to adopt a delegated act to supplement the regulation in accordance with Article 68. And for cybersecurity, there's a specific article, Article 59.2e, which foresees the sector-specific rules for cybersecurity aspect of cross-border electricity flows on common minimum requirements, planning, monitoring, and crisis management. And this is what we're working on. But so if you go to the next slide, please, it's like the question is, why do we need this? And there, the answer is because there are specific characteristics of the energy sector that we need to address. It's like the real-time requirements, the cascading effect, and also the mix of the technology that we have in place, which is the state-of-the-art technology, and which is also more combined with legacy technology. Then additionally, we have cybersecurity legislation in place, we have electricity legislation in place, and with this together, we could say we have a cyber world and the energy world, which means we have all these constructs of responsibilities which already exist. And for this now, really seek a specific solution. And you go to the next slide. I will show a little bit the process. I think it's more or less known the process of a network code, which is quite lengthy. So minimum 2 years. This time it was even shorter that it came to the commission. But then after the adoption process is also quite long, especially for this network code, because as it says, it's not purely energy. But nevertheless, so what happened so far in the past, we the commission defined the priorities for the network code, and we asked then the ESA to submit the non-binding framework guidelines. Once we received them, we asked ENTSO-E and the EU DSO entity to submit the network code to ESA. So they were drafting on the network code, they submitted it to ESA, who then revised it to see if the network code is aligned with the framework guidelines. And then they provided this draft code to the European Commission. This was last year. And then the next step starts, which you can see here with point 7. It's the adoption of the delegated act, which is in our case lengthy because, as I said, from these two worlds that come together now to find the legal way forward is not so straightforward. And that's what we have been doing over the last months. We will soon share this text that we worked on now with an expert group, with a dedicated expert group. In our case, it's the electricity coordination group. And then we will also go into inter-service consultation, also share, of course, with the European Data Protection Supervisory, translate it, and then publish it again for feedback. And only after, when it's so close to adoption, we still have the 2+2 months of the objection period of the Parliament and the Council. So what I would say from this graph now, where we are at the point 7, and we are quite advanced. I think we are nearly halfway there. Because I think the most important thing is to make it within the Commission services to know that the text makes sense. So also with our colleagues from DG Connect, that there are no overlaps. So if you go to the next slide, and also to know from a legal point of view that everything is well respected. So this is just a summary. So where we stand now, the next step would really be to share it with the expert group. From our perspective, it's also just what I want to share here is that we also had a lot of presentations of the network code, of the text, so not over the last stages and how it developed. Also before it came to the Commission, we had a lot of bilateral discussions, also with member state authorities, as well as with the industry. We presented at the NRS Cooperation Group, as well as at the Horizontal Working Party. So it's nothing secret, so it's everybody's well informed on what's going on and what will be in there. So when you go to the next slide, I would speak a little bit more about the scope and the objectives, because this network code, also as the name says, it applies to a subsector of the energy sector, to electricity. And within the electricity sector, the scope of applicability is limited to entities with the impact on cross-border electricity flows. There's a risk assessment that will identify which entities are the most relevant and what security measures they need to apply. Important here to say it's really that it's complementing and building upon NIS2 to include the sector-specific cybersecurity requirements. So we do not want to reinvent the wheel. And this is really one of the most important points here, because it provides really more precise instructions and procedures, and they are designed by the electricity stakeholders together with cybersecurity experts, especially for this subsector, for the electricity sector. And the network code also specifies measures in a coordinated way with industry contribution, and the outcome is ready to be used by different competent authorities. So it has an advantage itself. When you click to my last slide, please, and I will just give an overview of the network code. It will contribute to security of supply in cross-border electricity flows. And just to summarize a bit the main components of it, it will really provide a continuous and comprehensive approach to carry out all the steps from the risk assessment to the risk treatment and to the continuous improvement. It will provide clear roles, instructions to carry out such steps by the different stakeholders and authorities, including electricity and cyber, and including also the interactions. So what, when, and how. It will contribute to a higher common level of cybersecurity across the Union by providing guidance on how to identify and implement specific controls. It will enhance the information sharing between electricity undertakings and cybersecurity bodies, which is quite important. It will define and coordinate electricity and cybersecurity procedures when handling electricity incidents and crises, also with a cyber component, of course. We will define procedures for an exercise framework to enhance the preparedness. And we will also provide a set of rules for the protection of information exchange among the different stakeholders from electricity and from the cyber domain. And all this will also have a framework with monitoring, benchmarking, and reporting. So overall, the network code is quite comprehensive, but the core of it is, of course, the risk assessment and the risk treatment. So thank you very much. That's all from my side.
It's us to thank you, Michaela, for these very insightful brief on the cybersecurity network code, and really almost a tutorial on what we can expect in the near future and the way which we shall have to cooperate to the success of the network code. I have got a brief question from you, from our public, and it is, Michaela, will NCCS draft be shared with expert consultation and public consultation, or will it stay within the institutional boundaries?
No, so the next step, or as it is now, it will be shared with a dedicated expert group, which is the electricity coordination group. So that's really for certain members. But when we do so, we will also, for information, share it with everybody who was involved, like ENTSO-E, also the EU-DSO entity, and also other stakeholders, so for information purposes. And at the later stage, what I mentioned before, there's this publication period, which is for 4 weeks at the Europa homepage, like it's always for this kind of acts. And there, everybody can give feedback as well. But this will be at a later stage for feedback. For now, it will be just shared for information.
Okay, thank you very much, Michaela, and have a good prosecution of your extremely valuable work with the Commission. May I now ask Maika Vorenbach, Policy Officer for Cybersecurity and Digital Privacy Policy at DG Connect, to come on the screen. Micah, good morning. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you very much for bringing your experience also, since you contributed to a basic document that we tackled a few months back in another event devoted to cybersecurity, expressively to cybersecurity. And I'm speaking today from the city where you spent your Erasmus year. And it is a wonderful sunny day that you, one of those days in Milan, Italy, that you certainly regret. So we are looking forward very much to your contribution here, Micah. You have the floor whenever you wish.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction. Are you sharing my slides or should I share them?
They
are here. Perfect. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thanks a lot for the opportunity to speak today and present the Cyber Resilience Act. So as many of you know, I imagine the Cyber Resilience Act has been proposed on the 15th of September. And the key driver and objective of the Cyber Resilience Act is to enhance the security of products with digital elements. And with that goal also to prevent and enhance our resilience against supply chain attacks. And as you certainly know, the energy sector is also a key target and victim of these type of supply chain attacks that basically consist in introducing compromised codes through software products that are also included in energy utilities. So hence the importance to actually introduce mandatory rules for products with digital elements that are used across supply chains. So it's not only about the energy sector, as you know, but the Cyber Resilience Act is really a horizontal legislation that introduces these mandatory cybersecurity rules for the placement on the market of hardware and software products. It's a legislation that is based on the new legislative framework, which is the model provisions for product legislation in the EU. And the key goal of the Cyber Resilience Act is to enhance the responsibility of manufacturers, but it also includes obligation for distributors and importers with regard to the products that are developed and designed and placed on the market. But the obligation do not stop at the placement on the market. The Cyber Resilience Act has a life cycle approach, which is essential because the manufacturer needs to handle vulnerabilities that might appear in the product also after the placement on the market, and as foreseen in the proposal, for a period of up to 5 years. There is, of course, also an accountability of the manufacturer, and this is why the manufacturer needs to demonstrate conformity with the so-called essential requirements, and I will come back to the conformity assessment procedures later, and it will be actually a core focus of my presentation. One element I wanted to clarify about the Cyber Resilience Act and its scope is that it's full harmonization. Similar also to the delegated act of the Radio Equipment Directive. After the entry into force and the application of the Cyber Resilience Act, member states are in principle not allowed to apply divergent security requirements or higher even security requirements for the placement of the market. So the security requirements for placement of the market will be fully harmonized under the Cyber Resilience Act. Of course, member states still keep flexibility and room of maneuver to introduce security requirements as regards the use of the products and the procurement of products, for instance, in the area of critical infrastructure. Next slide, please. Given that the Cyber Resilience Act is a horizontal legislation and a cross-sectoral legislation, while preparing the legislation, we had, of course, also to keep a close eye at the interplay of the Cyber Resilience Act with other sectoral and cross-sectoral legislations. And I maybe wanted to bring some clarification of this interplay regarding certain legislation that I think are of specific interest to your sector. So first, regarding the radio equipment directive and its delegated act that introduces security requirements for radio equipment products. There we have an overlap with the Cyber Resilience Act in terms of product-related requirements. The Cyber Resilience Act goes beyond the Radio Equipment Delegated Act. Nevertheless, it is not the intention that both would apply at the same time, which means in practice that once the Cyber Resilience Act will become applicable, a transition will need to be organized between the Radio Equipment Delegated Act and the Cyber Resilience Act. And this is why we say that a possible amendment or repeal of the Radio Equipment Delegated Act could be envisaged. And we are, of course, in close contact with our GROW colleagues in this regard. And it means that, of course, the manufacturers that have started to apply the Radio Delegated Act and also the conformity assessment bodies that have been accredited for the Radio Equipment Delegated Act are on a very good track for applying the Cyber Resilience Act. And we have the intention, and this is also our message to the European Standardization Organization, of course, to build on the standards that are being prepared for the Radio Equipment Delegated Act in view of the implementation of the Cyber Resilience Act. Maybe another legislation that is important to mention here is the Measurement Instrument Directive that I understand your members are applying and subject to, for instance, in the case of smart meters. And there we have a full complementarity between the Cyber Resilience Act, the future Cyber Resilience Act, and the Measurement Instrument Directive. So indeed, there are essential requirements in the Measurement Instrument Directive that touch, for instance, on cybersecurity related aspects, such as protection against corruption of data. And in that case, what happens is that the implementation and application of essential requirements under the Cyber Resilience Act will directly also support and facilitate compliance with the essential requirements of the Measurement Instrument Directive. In practice, the manufacturer might need to go through a conformity assessment for the CRA and the Measurement Instrument Directive. However, this conformity assessment could either be done by the same conformity assessment body, or they could also be guidelines to ensure that conformity assessment bodies that do the respective testing of cybersecurity requirements would ensure a consistent approach. And for instance, the same complementarity exists with other product legislation, such as the machinery regulation, that also touch on cybersecurity related requirements when it comes to safety. And next slide, please. And next slide, I think we were going back. Next, yeah, conformity assessment. So a key element I would like to address in this presentation is the conformity assessment procedure, and in particular the interplay with the European cybersecurity certification. So first of all, when it comes to the approach on conformity assessment in the Cyber Resilience Act, we have chosen a risk-based approach that takes into account the fact that certain products, due to their intended use and or cyber-related functionalities, have de facto a higher cybersecurity risk, meaning that the exploitation of vulnerabilities in these products will de facto have higher damages than other products. So what we have done in order to provide also full legal certainty to manufacturers is to adopt a so-called list approach, where we have defined and proposed a limited list of products for which a third-party assessment would, under certain circumstances, be mandatory. So again, for proportionality reasons, we have distinguished between Class 1 and Class 2 products. And only for Class 2 products, including smart meters, there would be mandatory third-party assessment. Of course, it doesn't mean that for the default category, the manufacturer might not choose, depending on its risk assessment, to go for third-party assessment. However, some legal certainty for critical products needed to be ensured with regard to going to independent conformity assessment bodies. We also have a list, not a list actually, but potential categories of products which are seen as highly critical products. These categories have not yet been defined, but there is an empowerment for the Commission where needed, and again subject to specific conditions, that mandatory cybersecurity certification could be introduced. Next slide. So the key question is that if you're a manufacturer and you have or want to do third-party assessment to demonstrate conformity with the Cyber Resilience Act, what are your options? And in principle, there are two main options, or even three. Two options are possible under the new legislative framework, which is either to have, let's say, an EU type examination of your individual product. So you verify the technical design of your product, or you might choose to certify the quality management system of your product, or that is related to your product. And this might particularly be suited when you need to certify several products, or if, for instance, in case of software products, these products are undergoing regular software updates. But there is also the possibility to use European cybersecurity certification, and the Cyber Resilience Act foresees a key role for these certifications in demonstrating conformity with the Cyber Resilience Act. And I will elaborate a bit on that. Next slide. So there are specific provisions that are built in the Cyber Resilience Act proposal to prepare the ground for European cybersecurity schemes to be used to get a presumption of conformity and also demonstrate conformity with the essential requirements. So Article 18 is very important in that regard, because it says that there is a presumption of conformity with European cybersecurity scheme to the extent that the requirements in the CRA are covered. And also important is that it is foreseen that cybersecurity certifications can exempt the manufacturer from doing conformity assessment under the CRA, which means in practice, our goal is to, of course, avoid double certification. So if you as a manufacturer certify your product under a European cybersecurity certification scheme, the goal is that you would not need to do again a conformity assessment under the CRA using the new legislative framework procedures. So what does it mean in practice, for instance, for the common criteria cybersecurity scheme that is now in final stages and about to be adopted? Well, for the European cybersecurity scheme on common criteria, this is a specific case because the scheme has been developed before actually the adoption of the Cyber Resilience Act. And so the intention, as expressed in recital 4T, is for the Commission to specify via an implementing act where needed the presumption of conformity, meaning that the Commission is exploring now with cooperation of ENISA how precisely a certificate under the common criteria scheme can be used to demonstrate conformity with the Cyber Resilience Act. And we already see, for instance, that for especially security components, amongst other, also included in class 2, for instance, hardware security modules, smart cards, sorry, mentioned twice, secure elements. The common criteria could be a very attractive option for manufacturers to demonstrate conformity with the CRA. Of course, common criteria is not fit for all products, including not all products that are listed in class 1 and class 2. So of course there might be other certification schemes in the future that will be developed to also be used to demonstrate conformity with the CRA. So the door is open to have future and additional schemes, especially where higher assurance might be wanted by the sector. Of course, the requirements of the CRA will need to be fully taken into account as these future schemes are developed. Next slide. In terms of next steps, and in order to put this ecosystem in place, the CRA foresees a transition period of 2 years, which is very ambitious. But of course, we are already starting now the work on the standards. We also want to build, for instance, on the work that is being done for the RED Delegated Act, but also for instance, the conformity assessment bodies on common criteria are being prepared for the upcoming certification. So there's a lot of things happening in the conformity assessment ecosystem on which we can also build for the implementation of the Cyber Resilience Act. In terms of adoption of the proposal, the goal is, of course, a swift approval process, and we hope that the negotiations can be concluded before the next elections, and after which, indeed, the proposal will enter into force, and the transition period of 2 years will kick in. Next slide, and then I will conclude. Very briefly, so on the standardization work, because it's linked also to the implementation timeline, the harmonized standards will be developed to provide presumption of conformity with the CRA. As mentioned, we intend to build on the work that is also being done for the RED Delegated Act. And we have already kicked off a broader preparatory work in cooperation with NISA, with the Joint Research Center, and also with the European Standardization Organization to start a broad mapping exercise of all existing European national international standards. And we hope that we can conclude a more detailed gap analysis around the summer, to understand on which existing standards also we can most effectively build on to ensure that the needed standards will be available during the transition period for the CRA. And of course, you are very much encouraged to support this preparatory exercise. And we invite you in that regard also to contact the European standardization organizations. And of course, I'm also happy to answer any questions you might have. So with that, it's the end of my presentation, and thanks a lot for your attention.
It's we as well that have to thank you, Maika, for having conducted us hand in hand through this journey in the Cyber Resilience Act. When we were programming this seminar with Tomasz and Willem, the major concern was the overlapping of legislation, the non-possibility to interact within the different legislation. I must thank Michaela and you to have brought a larger clarification here, and to have stated that that concern was also the concern of the institution while working on the different procedures that apparently might have hindered the normal activity of ESMIG and E.DSO. So thank you very much for that. And I'll hand over to Tomasz now. Tomasz, welcome on the screen. And the panel introduction and the moderation is all yours. Thank you, Tomasz.
Thank you very much, Roberto. Thank you for for this introduction. And I would then, first of all, welcome everyone again here also to our panel. We have our panel discussion will start now. We have four very good, distinguished panelists here with us, which will bring, I think, interesting and also complementary views to the table. We have representatives from DSOs, but also from technology vendors, solution providers here that will provide different perspectives. And I will first just very briefly introduce myself. So my name is Tomás Llobet. I'm the Managing Director of ESMIG, and it's my pleasure today to moderate this panel. Then just briefly introducing the panelists in the order in which they will then also make their short presentations. So first, Gennaro Fiorenza, Head of Cybersecurity at Gridspertise, will be followed by Mario Roberto Jardim, Cybersecurity Leader at Schneider Electric and also Chair of the Cybersecurity Working Group at T&D Europe, Transmission and Distribution Europe, another association which both also ESMIG and E.DSO are working with. Then next will be Peter Allard, Data Privacy at the DSO Fluvius, and he's also a member of E.DSO's Task Force on Cybersecurity. And then last but not least, we'll have Andrzej Zaletel, who is Information Security Officer at Iskra Emiko, a member of ESMIG, and he is also the chair of ESMIG's Task Force on Cybersecurity Regulation. So these are our four panelists today. And just before we start with the opening remarks of the panelists, I would just briefly, every panelist will have 5 minutes to make some key statements, because we want to, of course, also hear from you how you see things. And that is, I think we have two big topics here today. One is obviously the topic that is the overarching one. And if you look at our title of the webinar, is EU regulation supporting the cyber revolution for the energy sector? Is removing this question mark. So we will see at the end of the session today whether we can remove the question mark, if you do agree this is the case. And there are two things that we want to also focus on in the panel today, in which I believe also the panelists will provide also some comments in their introductory remark. Is first of all, of course, cybersecurity is a moving target. So we want to see is the on the one hand the political objectives that we have also well aligned with the technical developments in the energy or specifically also electricity sector, and how can we then also make sure that this is better aligned and that the legislation is up to date and also future proof. And then the second one, this is also very much what we've seen now, Michaela and particularly also Micah focusing on in their presentations, is how these multiple pieces of legislation, actually the interplay of these multiple pieces of legislation, and how we can avoid any overlaps and make sure that the regulation is streamlined also in this way, clear and transparent also for stakeholders that will be impacted. So that is what we're also going to focus in the discussions today. And before handing over the floor to Gennaro, I want to say this already now. We have this Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. This is where you can place your questions. So already maybe as the speakers, after the speakers have made their interventions, you may have some questions. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A. And if you want to also address your questions specifically to one of the speakers, to Gennaro, Mario, Peter, or Andrzej, you can also type their names at Gennaro, at Mario, or you can say at all if everyone could be answering your questions. So we will then, after these first interventions, 5 minutes each, then take your questions, and we will of course also want to keep this as interactive as possible. So also the panelists are happy to interact, and we're also of course happy to take any questions also from Michaela or Micah, but of course also of our president and vice chair that have spoken in the beginning, Luis and Anne. So then after this introduction, over to you, Gennaro. We're glad to hear what you will have to say on the topics that are on the agenda today.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Thanks to the organization for inviting me. Please let me briefly introduce my company and myself. I am the head of telecommunication and cybersecurity in Gridspertise. This is a new company founded less than 2 years ago as a subsidiary of the Enel Group. Since the end of the last year, our company has been jointly owned by Enel and the leading global alternative investment manager, CVC Capital Partners, who support our mission of digitalization of the power grids. Our company is the developer of all the technological solutions largely adopted in the worldwide Enel E.DSO's community, with millions of smart meters already deployed and hundreds of thousands of smart grid installation. So currently we continue to provide technological solution for the internal Enel E.DSO's market, but looking to the external market too. Going to the topic, yes, we have seen also in the previous speech how is huge, no, the cybersecurity policy landscape at the European level. This is not in general something bad, but also according with the last comment by Roberto, the risk of an overlapping that can cause confusion among DSOs and manufacturers is real and present. And confusion often will mean extra costs too. For example, we have to consider different pieces of legislation under development covering product security, the market access regulation for suppliers with European conformity marking, and the critical infrastructure regulation. In the first case, radio equipment directive is defining a requirement for internet connected devices, including smart meters, and Cyber Resilience Act will put security requirements on products with digital elements. On the other end, of critical infrastructure regulation, NIS2 directive and network code put requirement on which products critical infrastructure operators such as the DSO can buy. Furthermore, for requirement checking too, it seems we have two competing frameworks. New legislative framework used for European conformity marking referred by RID and CRA, and European certification schemes developed by ENISA under Cybersecurity Act, which should be used by NIS2 and network code. So both frameworks are new, and manufacturers don't know for which to prepare, and DSOs probably don't know what is the best for their needs. So I like to summarize, just to conclude this my first part. In my opinion, we should find the way to work together as DSOs, TSOs, manufacturers, to contain and limit the differences among requirements set, having a common and shared baseline, of course. DSO and TSOs should have the flexibility to define their own security requirements. And I hope the politics should find a way to harmonize the different assurance methods. Okay, that's all for now. Thomas, I leave the floor to the other.
Thank you, Gennaro. Thank you for your introduction, and also for keeping perfectly to the 5 minutes. So now it's over to you, Mario. Mario Roberto Jardim from Schneider
Yes.
Electric.
Thanks, Thomas. First of all, thanks for the invitation and for the participation here today. What I brought for the introduction today is a view that's shared between us manufacturers that we discuss often in our working group, and I would like to share with you some of the challenges that we see on the market. So basically, we see clearly that we have a long product lifespan. So as a consequence, we have a very diverse and aging installed base in the field. So it's something that we have to deal regularly with, and there is never something that is not adapted to deal not to deal with something that's existing. So there's always a piece that is there that needs to be taken into account when we are deploying our solutions. So since we are talking about solutions, it's important to say that we have really in this environment where the systems and the software that we are deploying to solve the problems that we see on field, they are highly customized, and they are highly customized because the environment of the entities that are using them for their operational environment is different, and as well because we need to take into account that diverse installed base. So it's something that layers on the top of the other. It's really a context where we are in a system of systems environment. So it's several systems that are interconnected all together, delivering the value that the operator needs. So it's a little bit more complex than a product, even if the product is a good capacity in terms of security and is providing us a baseline, but we need to look at this at the end picture, which is far more complex than that. So for that, we see that the full system life cycle needs attention. You see, there is several moments under the conception of that solution that will be handled by different people with a different risk understanding and with different capacities of dealing with their risk. So language here is very important, and the way for you to transfer this to the people is very important. So people can do what's expected from them, deliver a high quality work, and as a consequence have something that is fully functional for the operator at the end. So here a remark from us is that we welcome the proposal of amendment of the Cybersecurity Act for the managed security service providers. We believe that there is a potential to this proposal that could help tackle those challenges that we see over there. And not to mention, when we are talking about this, we have to say every asset intervention is very complex when dealing with energy. It's never simple. It requires a lot of planning. It requires a lot of anticipation. So here, what we see is there is a need to invest in technology. There is a need to invest in personnel and to plan accordingly. Otherwise, assets will remain unpatched and still vulnerable to some of the problems that could be managed in different ways. So here is really something that needs attention. So we believe that the way forward could be to regroup sector efforts under network codes. We have the procurement recommendations over there. We think that we should really target to define, prioritize, and select a group of assets that needs attention, and altogether come up with a list of recommendations in terms of requirements and assessment that could fulfill the needs of the sector, that can be later customized by the operators with their own detailed risk assessment. So it's a way to ensure that the intended use of the product and what's expected from the product matches the risk of the sector. So we think this is a good way to go. It needs to be aligned with all the other proposals, but we think this is has a lot of potential. Okay. Another thing that we think is important is really to favor this holistic approach to systems and capitalize all the efforts that were done on the standardization bodies. So we are talking about 20 more years of standardization activity, focusing interoperability and security. So there is a lot of it there. There's a lot that has been produced. There's a lot that has been implemented on the solutions already. So here we really need to capitalize on that. And to capitalize on that, we need to leverage what is existing. There's a full functional ecosystem with standards that are being used, implemented in products and solutions that are being deployed. There are service providers that are assessing those things, that are issuing certificates that can even be recognized internationally. That is a lot of value. And we have people capable to do those systems, those solutions, those products, and there are as well assessment bodies that are capable to perform these assessments. So ecosystem is there. It's an answer to the request that we had on the sector many years ago to deploy solutions of security, and this is how the industry answered. So things are working and we are advancing. So the advice we give is to way forward is to capitalize on what was already there and try to push this to the next level according to the expectations of the group. So I finish here, Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. And then over to Peter Allert. So we will have also a perspective now from a DSO.
Yes, good morning. I'm Peter Allert. I'm CISO and DPO of Fluvius. Fluvius is a DSO in Belgium, Flanders. Has about 3 million meters. So it's not a big company when you see it in Europe. I'm also a member of the task force on the network code and DSO representative. So go to the next slide. So when we have, so we are also appointed in Fluvius as an operator of essential services on different scope. So we have OT scope, SCADA and control systems. And also the digital metering is seen as an essential service. For these services, we use some third parties that are strictly in the advanced meter management. So there we have service providers. But there's the chain of the digital meters is a chain of different components. So we interconnect also with the central market system and with the energy suppliers for the facturation of the energy. Okay, next slide. Yeah, when you see the system of the market, you have the chain of different components. You have the meter telecom operator, the advanced meter management, the MDM meter data management. So different components, different chains, where all different legislations are in place. So we try to gather these legislative demands in one system, one information management system, to get a grip on the legislations that are opposed to us. So for us, it's a big challenge to know what legislation is concerning the certain different parts in the chains. So that's my question for this webinar. How can we as a DSO comply with all the different legislations that are adapted for some of the parts of this chain? That's my introduction.
Thank you, Peter. And then the last intervention here as an introduction, we will hear now from Andre Salatel. Andre, over to you.
Thank you. I would just like to point out that I really appreciate that E.DSO and ESMIG have prepared this webinar, this event, on which we can all participate and share views from several, not several sectors, but several participants from the sector. Just quickly about Iskra Imeco. Iskra Imeco is a globally recognized company that offers products, services, and solutions in a broad range to the market, from energy perspective, water perspective, to digital platforms, and also e-mobility. My role in the Iskra Imeco is that I'm an information security officer for Iskra Imeco Group. And as Tomas has also said, I'm chairing the task force cybersecurity regulation group inside ESMIG. Before that, I have been working in other highly regulated sector. So some of the connections between this sector and energy sector now are really coming together. From my perspective, you can move on to another slide, Tomas. What I would like to focus on today is really important. What is really important for us as manufacturers is that we would like to avoid the overlapping of requirements, as my colleagues have already mentioned that, because there are really quite a lot of requirements coming in the regulatory acts and regulations, and these requirements are being duplicated, they're overlapping. So it is really important for our sector that this overlapping is minimized, or that it is not present in the upcoming regulatory acts. What I would also like to point out is that there are several smart metering and advanced metering infrastructure certification schemes already in place in Europe, not just in Europe, but also in broader sense. And we would really like to get to a level that these existing certification schemes and standards are recognized as European Union common criteria standards as defined by the Cybersecurity Act. And of course, that they are approved standards, and that we can use them as a proof of conformity for any of these existing, or let's say upcoming regulations. What we have also noticed, for example, in the CRA, in the upcoming CRA, is that the product classification process that is defined in one of the articles is we don't see it as the most transparent one, and we would really like to see that we have a transparent cybersecurity risk assessment methodologies and frameworks in place that really provide the relevant information for the products, that really classify products according to these methodologies and frameworks, because strictly speaking, we see that some of the products that were classified as class 1 or class 2 might be differently classified if there was let's say, a more transparent cybersecurity risk assessment methodology in place. But this is really something that we can further discuss during the Q&A session or later in our discussion. So these are the main 3 points, main 3 statements from my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrzej. So thanks, everyone. Now we've heard from the 4 panelists, their introductory remarks and their perspectives also on the topics today on the agenda. And now we very much hope to get some questions also from the audience. We have some questions here. I don't know if this is something that also the Commission could answer, but the first questions we got here are more from a cost perspective, in terms of these measures, of course, may generate some costs, and who is going to be responsible in then paying for the costs. So this is here a bit as from a perspective also from a consumer. I don't know if any of you would be wanting to answer that question.
Yes, Thomas, Gennaro speaking about cost. I mentioned in my speech this aspect, and I think that if the landscape is not clear, very precise and harmonized, the cost increasing is a real risk. We internally, as a tech company, we face this aspect, the security cost as an investment, no, of our product. We implement security by design approach, and we have to face also according with the previous speech, also the target of maintaining the cybersecurity of our products along all the life cycle. So it's something that we have to face, and it's important for maintaining this cost low, to have a precise framework. For example, if we look at different assurance framework, it's, of course, if I have to check the products and the compliance of the products to different frameworks, time and cost will increase. So this is the reason, because I mentioned that it needs to have the more clear scenario and the framework to be referred as vendor and a critical infrastructure owner.
Thanks, Gennaro. No, of course, all these requirements will lead to higher regulatory or compliance costs, which then are also translated, of course, into costs also along the whole value chain here. Any other remarks on the aspect of costs, compliance costs, and also what that means, maybe even ultimately for end consumers, which was, I think, also one of the questions here related to the costs. Mario, Peter, Andrzej, any further comments? Here on the costs, so we have, or besides regulatory compliance, we have a question here. What are the technical and business challenges companies are facing in terms of cybersecurity? So maybe then let's...
Thomas, if I may, I have a comment on the costs as you request. So on our side, we see this with attention, of course, because we are not talking about 1, 2, 10, or 100 products in the portfolio. We're talking with numbers much higher than that, and depending on the company, can be extremely high, the number of products that are commercialized. So it's something that really worries us. But for that, we have been certifying our development life cycle for quite a while. So most of our members have already in place a secure development life cycle for their products that are assuring the security of the products when they are placed. So a good part of those requirements that we see there can be answered by the investment that we already made. But new certifications, new third-party certifications, are something that may be a problem because we already went one step further on voluntary certifications, like some other industries, to demonstrate maturity on the products as an answer to the request of our customers and of the industry.
Thank you, Mario. If we don't have any further comments on the particular aspect of the cost, although we may go back to that in the end, I think also an aspect that would be interesting to hear is if Europe wants to be also a leader in cybersecurity regulation. And we know, of course, how important cybersecurity is, particularly also in the energy and electricity sector. What are the impacts then also, not only in terms of costs, but maybe more globally also on competitiveness? So that would be maybe something that could be interesting to go back to later on. But let's first take a couple of the questions that we have here now that are coming up. So one was the one that I just mentioned briefly before, regarding technical and business challenges companies are facing. So we're not talking here about regulatory or compliance costs, but more like technical and business operation challenges. Is there anyone of you who would like to answer that question? Maybe with some examples.
Well, maybe for DSO, it's always a challenge to choose the right products in the chain. So you have to pick up the best performing elements in your chain to have a maximum security. So as an end user of a product, it's sometimes very difficult to get the right requirements, to get the right objectives in the purchasing of your products, of your services that you get. So it's for a DSO, it's a challenge.
Yes, if I may add from the manufacturing perspective as well, yeah, there are several challenges in place that the new, let's say, regulation would bring forth. For example, from the CRE perspective, it is bringing quite heavy requirements from the vulnerability management perspective. This is something, of course, that we already do in our, let's say, product life cycle and development of our products. But now sharing the relevant data to relevant authorities in relevant times, and then also to react on these vulnerabilities which can be reported and discovered not only by ourselves but also by let's say our customers or other entities. This might be quite a big challenge, and we have a gap on how to tackle this challenge specifically from let's say resource perspective, and also how we can provide the relevant updates in the framework in the time that was proposed by the CRA. So definitely there are challenges from the vulnerability management perspective for our company, for example.
Thank you, Andre. So we've now heard from Peter and Andre different perspectives from DSO and also from the manufacturer. Anything you would like to add on that, on the more concrete technical business operation challenges, Gennaro or Mario? If not, we can then move to the next question. Here we have that question on standards, product certification conformity. So as has been stated, cybersecurity is a moving target. So here, looking at standards, product certification conformity by bringing a product on the market, the question is here, who is responsible for maintaining the security during the lifetime, the manufacturer or the user? How is this organized in the regulation? This would be probably a question that would be good if the Commission could answer that, but I'm not sure they are here with us now. So I would like to then maybe hear your perspectives on that. Who wants to start?
I can start. I can make a comment on that. I think it's an interesting point. but it's to us, it's something that has been done by the two parties. Okay, so we can, of course, provide the patches, provide everything that's needed to maintain security at the expected level. But if the user of the product or the asset owner is not performing the patching, there's nothing we can do about it. So here, it's something that really, really needs to be coordinated, and there should be a regular review on those things triggered every time there's a new vulnerability to make sure that the patch is available on time and the user of that equipment or the component can patch it, and then he has to planify it, which was the challenge that I mentioned at the beginning, because every time we deal with assets in the field, it's extremely complex to patch them. It's not an easy target, and it's very hard. So here, there is a real need for investment in technology and in the personnel that's performing those things, because it's not an easy job.
Yes,
Gennaro.
yes, if I can add something, yes, this is yes, probably from the patching point of view, we as a tech company, as a vendor, we feel the need to be fast in detect any kind of new vulnerability. We have set up a continuous vulnerability process and system in order to catch the zero-day vulnerabilities and so on. But because of my position, I spent a lot of time also in cybersecurity of the group in the NL. So also the utilities has to do his job in this kind of maintaining the cybersecurity of the infrastructure, because sometimes not just in electricity sector, but everywhere the patch is ready, but it's not simple to deliver it on 1,000 and 1,000 installation in field. So from the process and technical point of view, we should be able together, vendors, customers, to manage this issue. But about regulation, probably you are right, Thomas. Something that can answer someone that is not more with us.
If I may, sorry, Thomas, go ahead. If I may add just something here. So who would to maintain the security during the lifetime? As if I look at strictly from a user perspective or consumer perspective, I would say that the consumer would never do or doesn't have to do anything to keep the product secure. But it is in the manufacturers or in the utilities power, not power, but responsibility to ensure that the product that end user is using is of course secure. So from my perspective, as I see it in the, for example, in the regulation, in the CRA, the manufacturer is going to be the one that will have to provide the relevant security updates. But as both of my colleagues have said, it is not a simple case. It's not, security patch, for example, and then we just install it and everything works. There are other considerations that need to be taken into place because it is not an easy process. It is a complex process. But yes, to answer your question, from my perspective, I would say that manufacturer or the manufacturer of the product is the one that is responsible for security.
Thank you very much, Andrzej. And I think here we have then also answered a question we have here on liability. We have a couple more questions to take. We also need to be mindful of the time. So we have a couple more minutes here for this discussion. But I think there's a few interesting questions here. One that's being asked here specifically, maybe Andrzej, since you were speaking, a question to ESMIG. I would of an attendee that would like to understand the role of Senelec protection profile for smart meter minimum requirements. How can this help in the cybersecurity requirements coming up by RED and CRA? This is maybe something you want to answer, Andrzej. Otherwise, I'm sure this is also something that Willem, my colleague Willem, then in the closing remarks may get back to. But Andrzej, maybe you want to give a first quick perspective on that.
Yeah, I can give a few points, but I'm sure that really Willem is the one that has the best information regarding this topic. So I'm sure that he can add few remarks at the end of the discussion. But yes, really, if we are talking about the protection profile, Senelec protection profile for smart meters, we have put it in a way, or we have built it in a way that the requirements that it covers basically can be used as to show conformance with RED and specifically with RED and also later on with CRA. We are really pushing forward that the protection profile that was the ESMIG is recognized as really a cybersecurity act standard, so European Union Common Criteria standard as well, and it can really be used to prove conformity with the requirements that are set out by the current legislation that we are seeing. We are still not at the end of this journey, so this is still a process that is happening. But yeah, behind the protection profile for smart meters. But as I said, Willem here is an expert on this topic, and I'm sure that he can add additional remarks at the end to this question.
Thank you, Andrzej. So then we'll be also glad to hear then later on from Willem a bit more on the protection profile. We have two more questions. So one is a question that's interesting in terms of compliance of suppliers, service providers which are not based in the EU, and whether we should be anticipating their involvement in supply chain compliance and how. I mean, I would expect that, of course, anyone who operates or puts products in the market in the EU will need to be compliant, whether they're based in the EU or not. But would be still interesting to hear from Mario or Gennaro or Peter on that. And then we'll have a last question that I think is maybe then the one we can close. That will be the question on the political challenges that EU policymakers face when it comes to protecting the increasingly, of course, digitalized or smart energy networks against cyber breaches, which we, of course, know are happening all the time. So maybe first, quickly, who wants to answer the question on the compliance of non-EU suppliers before we go to the last question? No further comments on the one regarding non-EU based.
I can make a comment on that, Thomas.
Please, Mario.
So on the network codes, we will have provisions directly addressed to the critical service providers. Okay, so anyone that's providing services or equipment to an operator under the critical perimeter. But there is at this stage nothing specific to the location of this force. If they are based in EU or not, so there is no obligation for them explicitly on the text to be in EU. Okay, so this is the first thing, but there is things related to the vetting of the personnel. There are things related to the capacity of the personnel. There are a lot of other risk type controls to manage a certain risk that could be introduced by this force. So it will depend on the interpretation of the operator at the end of the day, I believe.
Thank you. And then the last question, which probably is also something we can hear about in the closing remarks, But Gennaro or Peter, if you have some comments also on political challenges when it comes to protecting the smart networks.
Well, my remark is that the political challenges are that we understand that the smart grids, smart metering is very important, have to be protected from cyber risks. So it can be used as a political means. That's in fact the way that the European Commission tries to defend the essential services. So we have to acknowledge the fact that it's very important for the civilization, for the communities. That's my remark on it. But if I may return to the remark of the non-EU producers, we also have a GDPR. So this wasn't mentioned when we collect data from end users. We are in the GDPR legislation. So we cannot forget this legislation. It's not only cybersecurity, but also GDPR.
Thanks.
But
Peter.
This point,
last exactly. Then, before we go to the closing remarks.
Yes. Just because this question probably is going to match something that I mentioned in my conclusion. I think that from the EU policymaker, I think that especially in our electricity sectors, I think that they can do a good work helping this sector to in harmonizing the frameworks and containing the differences among the different legislation. This I think this is the best support that we can receive as critical infrastructure owners and manufacturers.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thanks to the 4 panelists. And as always with a panel discussion, we are running a bit out of time. So there would have been probably some more questions, but looking at the time, we definitely need to hand back the floor to Roberto and Willem for the concluding remarks. And thank you very much again.
Yes, thank you very much, Thomas. Thank you to the panelists. It was an excellent discussion, in my opinion. And you touched on all the really open questions that are going around the industry, not only because of cybersecurity connected issues and item or cyber tech connected item, but also very much on the hard stuff that is a part of the production of the equipment manufacturers. We at E.DSO are currently discussing with T&D ways to reciprocally offer, in the respect of the market and competition law of the European Union, to offer enough visibility among the 2 industries in order to avoid the bottlenecks, to avoid the problems deriving from the competition of non-EU manufacturers. And most of the items that you have been touching in this discussion are also on the other side of the discussion that we are carrying on with T&D and the equipment manufacturers in general. So this is one of my takeaways today, and I must say that what we have seen in terms of commitment from the institution, from the Commission, is the way of accompanying the matching between innovation and transformation, which is distilled from the introduction and the successive discussions that have been ignited by Michaela and Micah respectively from DG Energy and DG Connect. But other elements that on this lead that was opened by Anne, I'm taking on is that there cannot be a transformation that is a derivation also or only from the industrial approach, but it must be strongly, let's say, supported by legislative innovation and transformation as well. So the industrial process cannot be such if not led by an institutional process and the ability of the institution to keep a dialogue with the industry open, which is exactly what we wanted to demonstrate today. I would assign also a very good value to the insight and recap of the network code for cybersecurity that Michaela offered us, because if you go through that, reviewing the materials that will be put online and the recording of this webinar that will be available, well, you will discover a lot of aspects and angles that you do not usually consider in planning what is your activity in this sector. The same must be said for the evolution of the Cyber Resilience Act that Micah offered us, and that she tried to also offer us in the most let's say open possible way. There will be still a lot to do, especially to incorporate those aspects and those approaches into future production and the future planning of the cyber resilience in our respective sectors. But this has been very precious in terms of hot points to be considered before moving the next steps. And talking about the next steps, I will think, and I will leave now the floor to Willem. I think that it will be inevitable that organizations like ours, so E.DSO and ESMIG, continue on these track, and maybe consider to have a meeting like this one becoming a tradition, an annual tradition, in order to make a point with the institution on where we are in the dialogue about cybersecurity at work between industry and grid operators. We haven't discussed too much about grid operators here, but you may imagine that the association that I represent devotes most of their investment to the assurance that the cyber framework in which they move and operate is sufficiently safeguarded and is sufficiently and even more than sufficiently ahead of the curve in order to allow not only the transition but also the smooth operation of serving the citizens with the basic need of distributed power. So thank you very much. And Willem, the floor is yours. And thank you very much to ESMIG Structure for having helped us to make all of these a real thing. We had a lot of preparatory meeting here. Thanks to the ESMIG Structure and to the E.DSO structure for all the back office work that has been done. Willem.
Yeah, thank you, Roberto. Thank you for the words. And one of the things that I took also from the panel discussion is something that you mentioned when we discussed the maintenance of security. So how is security to be maintained, and who is responsible for what? So basically also this points towards a close cooperation between the manufacturers and the operators, because the manufacturer, according to the current legislation and the new legislation, is responsible for not just placing a product on the market that is secure, but also to maintain during the life cycle the security of that product, while the utility or the DSO is responsible for the operation and the use of the product, and in that sense, of course, also needs to maintain the security of a total system. In our case, where we are thinking about then is the AMI. What I wanted to do is just to go from the beginning until the end to see what are the highlights that I took out of the presentations that were done, starting with Michaela Colau, that presented the network code on cybersecurity. This code complements, that's the conclusion, complements and builds on the NIS2 directive with sector-specific requirements. And for us, I think that's also, we had some questions about the differences in legislation and where to apply what legislation. The NCCS and NIS are both more process-oriented, while the RED and the CRA are more product and production and distribution focused. So it's also important to understand the different natures of the legislation. And I'm very thankful of the fact that both Michaela and Maika Vorenbach both indicated very clearly the nature of the NCCS and the nature of the CRA. So going to that presentation of Maika Vorenbach, I recognized a lot of provisions and suggestions that she made based on questions that came out of the market earlier regarding the CRA. First of all, the nature of this regulation, this act is on full harmonization. So that means that the member states are not able to define additional requirements. That was also a question. So what can you still do as a member state or as an operator of an infrastructure? Well, the CRA and also she referred to the MID are both pieces of legislation that are about the placing of a product on the market. While there is a possibility, and those are the other examples that we have seen from the NIS2 and also NCCS to have requirements for procurement of products, but also for the installation and the use of products. So that's important to understand the different nature of the legislation that we have discussed today. Maika also mentioned the fact that, and that's an important one for the manufacturers at least, that the CRA and the RED, the Radio Equipment Directive, cybersecurity requirements will not be applied at the same time. So still unknown if this means that it will that the RED delegated act will be repealed. That's where also Maika was hinting at. Or if there will be some statement that says that if a product complies with the CRA requirements, then it implies also a conformance with the Red Delegated Act, something like that. But that's not clear yet. I did not hear a very clear statement, but at least there is an intention to take care that this overlap is avoided. Important to understand also from Maika is that the CRA will support the cybersecurity requirements of the MID that is under revision. So in this revision of the MID, it would be good to also have some kind of reference with the CRA security requirements. So also there the overlap is avoided. Finally, that was also one of the questions that came along about the cybersecurity certification schemes. They might provide presumption of conformity for the CRA. This might is still something that needs to be settled. It's not very clear. But as Anze Zalatel also indicated, for us as manufacturers of smart meters and related products, the The cybersecurity scheme developed for the common criteria approach, EUCC, is an important one because we have developed a protection profile already a few years back. This is a nice example of having a solution before the legislation came along. It doesn't always happen, and yeah, in most cases, of course, it is the other way around. But in this case, we had a protection, or we already have a protection profile for a while that is based on a common set of requirements that were found in among the member states. And when we finished this profile, then suddenly came the Cybersecurity Act in force that requires a certification and a certificate for at least the products in critical infrastructures. And then came the CRA that also references to this EUCC, the European Common Criteria Scheme, where at least for smart meters, we have a protection profile that can be used for getting a certificate, and then also the presumption of conformity with the CRA. So those things are important for us, and I'm happy to have seen that also the Commission is thinking in this direction, is working in this direction. Gennaro Fiorenza mentioned that vendors and utilities need to claim a clear framework, a legislative framework, so it should be clear what are the requirements and how they relate to each other. And operators of critical infrastructure should also be able to define requirements for their national infrastructure, and that basically is possible with by applying the NIS2 and the network code. Mario Yardim is in favor of a holistic approach for systems on top of the individual approach for that focus on individual products. Peter Allard claimed that it is important to know which legislation applies to which part of the metering infrastructure. So you have meters, you have data concentrators, gateways, head-end systems, meter data management systems. So for the users and the manufacturers and the users of those products, it's important to know exactly what pieces of legislation will apply. Anze again indicated we need to avoid overlapping legislation, but also we need to be able to classify the products, and as we have seen in the CRA distinguishes different classes with different risks, but it is important to classify products based on a transparent risk analysis. Then finally, some conclusions from the panel discussion on cost. So we have heard that manufacturers are prepared for stringent cybersecurity requirements for critical infrastructures. However, these requirements must be and stay cost effective. Maintaining security, it's already mentioned in the beginning of my contribution, is that there should be a strong cooperation between manufacturers and operators of the critical infrastructure and manufacturers of the products during the life cycle of the product, and the operators, the utilities, DSOs for the operation and the use of the product. Then finally, challenges for policymakers. Of course, is still something that we started with, is to manage the harmonized approach, the aligned approach of all legislation that is coming to us. So take care that there is no overlap, there are no gaps, and that legislation is aligned. Yeah, that's basically was my list of notes that I made. Thanks for your attention, and I think back to Roberto.
Yes, thank you very much, but not properly back. It's just to wave our hands and thanks again the many participants to this webinar. Thank you, Thomas, for coming on the screen. And as I said, the recording of this event will be available, so the material, and we shall issue in brief a joint press release with ESMIG, where you can find also the references to the specific recording and materials, but they will be also printed on our website so that you can see here on the screen. Thank you again, and enjoy your lunch. It's about time. Bye.